go to youth camp, Chick-fil-A is gone, she closed, yeah.
Yeah.
Cause Alex and Andrew both work there.
That's why. Well, that's why I didn't understand why Connor applied at the West Silver one and not this one over here. Since this one hires everybody from this church.
Yeah, she works there now.
Tyler was there when he was in high school. A month or two. Yeah.
So I'm recording now, but remember, it's only going to us, our class. It's not like I'm gonna give it to everyone in the world, unless you want me to share it with you. So anyway, as we start Jeremiah, I want everyone to get the phones out. Look at your phones for a minute. Consider the power that your cell phone holds in your hand. It's been said that a single modern phone has more power than all the computers used to send people to the moon decades ago. So the question is, what was the cell phone, or what was life like before cell phones?
Simple.
Yeah.
Simple? Who said that? Simple? Yeah.
I don't, but was it though? Cause
We managed to get by without them, I mean.
we did, but
Not
does
spoiled now.
cell phones not make life a little bit easier as far as?
It spoils
convenience?
everybody.
Yeah.
But
And
back then, we weren't in everybody's business in
No,
town, you know?
Yeah.
It was like, you worry about your friends and what they're doing,
Yeah, there was.
and
more-
not everybody was your friend.
Yeah.
You know, now we've got 4,000 friends and friends.
I remember, before cell phones and before pagers,
Pictures.
yeah.
I'm glad
remember-
everybody in this room understands what those are, okay?
I mean, I know what they are, but I don't.
Well, I remember
you
driving
send certain
up.
messages to actually, to like where the numbers make up messages.
Yeah.
That was it,
If
yeah.
your parents text you 911, you better be
Yeah.
calling back immediately.
Well, I remember driving up to a payphone, calling.
Or collect calls and talking real fast so you don't
Yeah.
pay.
Yep, I'm ready to be picked up now.
What's that one commercial? It's Bob, we had a baby, it's a boy. Yeah, the simple jokes, right? This is why I have all these dumb dad jokes the kids love. So with all the power and convenience, the primary purpose of a cell phone is still to communicate, getting a message from one person to another. And also, I wanted to say something about the cell phone is, I guess because of the career that I'm in, I have all my kids tracked. I watch them all the time. Even my oldest daughter, she's 20 now, and she's okay with it. And so, I think cell phones for me, peace of mind has become easier, but I think the world has changed too. I don't think we had that much of an issue back in the day. So we will be experiencing this with Jeremiah. It was so important on how God made sure his message was delivered and received clearly. I really like this picture because it really reminded me of Star Wars.
I was gonna say, where's Darth Vader?
There's actually
I thought it was Star Wars.
a TV series on right now that talks about how they made all that. I mean, it's really cool. But it kind of ruins it for you. So here's the intro to Jeremiah. And by the way, there's a stack of books back there. If you want to take one home, it's free of charge. Just take one home and read it so you'll know what we're talking about for that session. Even though I sway away from it a little bit just because it gears towards us in our age group. And so Jeremiah is not written chronologically. This is the tough part that we have to go through. The majority of the book is poetry. I'm not a poetry guy. I want to say that I might do some cool romantic things, but my wife says otherwise. So chapter 1, Jeremiah's call. Chapter 2 through 35 is the prophetic warnings to Judah. The next one is Jeremiah's suffering and Jerusalem's fall. The Next one is prophetic warnings to the nations. Once again, it's not chronological. Lamentations was also written by Jeremiah. I didn't know that. Did not know that. We won't go through the entire book of Lamentations, but it does kind of dip into some of the things in Jeremiah. It won't be today. And Jeremiah was the son of a priest in Anathoth. I think it's how you pronounce it. I always kept saying Anathoth, but I think it's Anathoth. So think about that, or remember this last line here. Jeremiah was the son of a priest. He was a preacher's kid. So keep that in mind. So we're going to watch this video here. Hopefully it plays. I'm sure there's going to be a commercial.
The book of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah was an Israelite priest who lived and worked in Jerusalem during the final decades of the kingdom of southern Judah. He was called as a prophet to warn Israel about the severe consequences of breaking their covenant with God through their idolatry and injustice, and he even predicted that the empire of Babylon would come as God's servant to bring this judgment on Israel by destroying Jerusalem, taking the people into exile. And sadly, his words became reality. Jeremiah lived through the siege and destruction of Jerusalem and witnessed the exile personally. Now, this book came into existence in a really interesting way. Chapter 36 tells us that after 20 years of Jeremiah's preaching in Jerusalem, God called him to collect all of his sermons and poems and essays and commit them to writing, which Jeremiah did by employing a scribe named Baruch, who wrote down and compiled all of this material into a scroll. Now, Baruch also gathered lots of stories about Jeremiah, and he linked all the pieces together. And so this is why the book reads like an anthology, a collection of collections. It's all been arranged to present this prophet as a messenger of God's justice and grace. So the book begins with God calling Jeremiah to be a prophet, and he's given a dual vocation. He will be a prophet to Israel, but also to the nations, and his words will both uproot and tear down, but also plant and build up. In other words, he's going to accuse Israel and warn them of God's coming judgment, but he also has a message of hope for the future. Now, this opening perfectly summarizes the first large section, chapters 1 to 24. It's a collection of Jeremiah's writings from before the exile. And the core idea here is that Israel has broken the covenant with God and violated all the terms of the agreement they made that are written in the Torah. And in a number of ways. They've adopted the worship of all kinds of Canaanite gods, building idol shrines all over the land, and Jeremiah develops the metaphor of idolatry as adultery, and uses the language of prostitution, promiscuity, unfaithfulness to describe how Israel has given their allegiance to other gods. Jeremiah also repeatedly accuses Israel's leaders. The priests, the kings, the other prophets have all become corrupt. They've abandoned the Torah and the covenant, which has led to a tragic result: rampant social injustice. The most vulnerable people in Israelite communities, the widows, the orphans, the immigrants, were all being taken advantage of in clear violation of the laws of the Torah, and Israel's leaders didn't even seem to care. So a classic place where all of these ideas come together is in chapter 7. It's called Jeremiah's Temple Sermon. The Israelites are coming to worship their God in the temple as if everything is just fine, but outside the temple they are worshiping other gods, and some were even adopting the horrifying Canaanite practice of child sacrifice. And so Jeremiah makes his very unpopular announcement. The God of Israel is coming in judgment. He's going to destroy his own temple and punish Israel by sending an enemy from the north. This is an army that God would allow to conquer Jerusalem, and as you read on, you discover he's talking about the great empire of Babylon. And so this all leads up to a transition in chapter 25. Israel hasn't turned back to their God, and so in the first year of Babylon's new king, Nebuchadnezzar, God tells Jeremiah to announce that the Babylonian armies are headed for Israel and all of its neighbors to conquer them and take them into exile for 70 years. He compares Babylon to a cup of wine filled to the brim with God's just anger at all of Israel's injustice and idolatry, and God will make Israel and the nations drink from this cup. Now, this chapter is key to the book's design because everything that follows is going to focus on Babylon's coming attack. First on Israel in chapters 26 to 45, and then on the other nations in chapters 46 to 51. The section about Israel first contains stories about how Jeremiah begged Israel to turn back, how he warned them right up to the last minute, but the leaders of Israel kept rejecting him. This section concludes with a large collection of stories about how Jerusalem was under siege and eventually destroyed by Babylon, and about how Jeremiah was persecuted all through that time and eventually kidnapped and taken against his will to Egypt by a group of Israelite rebels. Now, right here in the middle, in between all of these dark stories of disaster and judgment, is a collection of Jeremiah's messages of hope for Israel's future. So he picks up on Moses' prediction that after Israel had broken the covenant and gone into exile, see Deuteronomy 30, God would not abandon his people. Rather, he would renew his covenant with them and transform their hearts. Jeremiah develops this promise, and he says that God is going to one day inscribe the laws of the Torah, not on tablets, but rather on the hearts of his own people. He's going to heal their rebellion so that they can truly one day love and follow him fully. And so one day, Israel will return back to the land, and the Messiah from the line of David is going to come, and that's when all nations will come to recognize Israel's God as the true God. So these chapters are showing that despite Israel's apostasy, God is not going to let Israel's sin get the final word. Rather, his own faithfulness will bring about the fulfillment of his promises, no matter what. After this, we find the large collection of poems about how God is going to use Babylon to judge the nations around Israel. So Egypt, Philistia, Moab, Edom, Ammon, Damascus, Hazor. But then, surprisingly, the longest poems are saved for last, and they're about God's coming judgment on Babylon itself. So although God used this nation to execute his justice, God doesn't endorse their violence and idolatry. And so Babylon too will come under the standard of God's justice. And so Jeremiah denounces this nation's pride and injustice as well. Now, Babylon is larger than life in these poems, and it reminds us of the image of Babylon all the way back from Genesis chapter 11. Babylon has become the archetypal rebellious nation. In their glorification of wealth and war, God's going to give this nation over to its own destruction. The book concludes with a story taken from the end of the book of 2 Kings. It tells about Babylon's final attack on Jerusalem, how they destroyed the city walls and burned the temple and took the people into exile. The story shows how Jeremiah's warnings of judgment from chapters 1 through 24 were fulfilled. But then the chapter ends with a short story about the captive Israelite king Jehoiakim. He's heir to the line of David. And the king of Babylon releases him from prison and shows him favor and invites him to eat at the royal table for the rest of his life, and that's how the book ends. So it's a little glimmer of hope. And this recalls Jeremiah's promises of hope from chapters 30 to 33. God hasn't abandoned his people or the promise of a future coming king from David's line. And so while this book contains a huge amount of warning and judgment, the final words conclude with a note of hope for the future. And that's what the book of Jeremiah is all about.
I agree. But
So the fun thing with the serpent is, how does the serpent talk? What and not only that, but why is
there's a lot going on here, and Creighton kind of told us at the teachers' meeting that there's no way we're going to be able to go verse by verse. There's just a lot. So they have it broken down pretty well. I like how they broke it down. Because Jeremiah is a big book when you include Lamentations too. So Jeremiah was from Anathoth. Anathoth, and I'll show you here in a minute, is located about 3 miles northeast of Jerusalem. It was a Leviticus town in the territory of Benjamin. The name comes from the Canaanite deity Anat, A-N-A-T, goddess of war. So look at this right quick, just kind of sink it in. We're kind of backing up just a little bit before we get to Jeremiah. These are prophets. Anyone know what a prophet is? Just throw it out there. Prophet is someone that God calls just to speak for him. That's all it is. Do we know what a modern day prophet is today? Ish. Pastor of a church. Those who, I'm definitely not a prophet, but those who just speak the word to the Christians, to God's people. Okay. So we had Nahum. You could see the years there. Zephaniah. Habakkuk. And then you have Jeremiah. And that's where we're at today. God called, so 626 through 586 BC. Any questions there? It's just a breakdown. I was supposed to make copies for you, but I'd rather you read it up here. All right, your phones, your Bibles, go ahead and open it up. We're going to read Jeremiah chapter 1, 4 through 19. Do I have a volunteer? Anyone want to? That's a lot of verses. Anyone interested?
I'll read as soon as I get here.
All right. Let me read up to 10 and you carry on from 11.
Okay.
Okay. So, verse 4, the word of the Lord came to me. I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. But I protested, "Oh no, Lord God, look, I don't know how to speak since I am only a youth." Then the Lord said to me, "Do not say I am only a youth, for you will go to everyone I send to you and speak whatever I tell you. Do not be afraid of anyone, for I will be with you to rescue you." This is the Lord's declaration. Then the Lord reached out his hand, touched my mouth, and told me, "I have now filled your mouth with my words. See, I have appointed you today over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and demolish, and then to build and plant."
The word of the Lord came to me. What do you see, Jeremiah? I see the branch of an almond tree, I replied. The Lord said to me, "You have seen correctly, for I am watching, to see that my word is fulfilled." The word of the Lord came to me again. What do you see? I see a pot that is boiling, I answered. It is tilting toward us from the north. The Lord said to me, "From the north, disaster will be poured out on all who live in the land. I'm about to summon all the peoples of the northern kingdom, declares the Lord. Their kings will come and set up their thrones in the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem. They will come against all her surrounding walls and against all the towns of Judah. I will pronounce my judgments on my people because of their wickedness in forsaking me, in burning incense to other gods, and in worshiping what their hands have made. Get yourself ready. Stand up and say to them whatever I command you. Do not be terrified by them, or I will terrify you before them. Today I have made you a fortified city, an iron pillar and a bronze wall to stand against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, and the people of the land. They will fight against you, but you will not overcome you, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord.
Thanks, sir. So in verse 5, he said, God chose you, God chose Jeremiah to be a prophet to the nations before he was even born. He said, "I called you," period. And then in verse 6, "But I protested." Jeremiah's response is, "I am too young, I am not sure what to say. I'm not ready for that." Do you think it really has to be because he was young? Do you think if he was older, maybe he would have been more open to it? I don't know. You're talking about a kid who was, his dad is a priest, right? So that comes to mind. He just didn't really felt led, or he was scared to do it more than likely because he was a youth. So how us that have grown up in churches for all of our life, who are usually the worst kids growing up?
Preacher's kid.
The preacher's kids.
I was saying deacons.
And so they're more than likely, I mean, they're the most rebellious, I think. It's a bad judgment. Well, sorry about that, but just sometimes this is what it is. It's probably just because, I mean, why? Why do you think that is? Or why is it that they are the ones that go out and don't usually follow in their dad's footsteps? Any comments on that?
My husband would say it's because they've seen the meanness of the church towards their parents.
You hear the,
Oh, the bad of the
bad,
good, bad, and
honest
the
stuff,
ugly,
yes.
yeah, and so they rebel against that. I also think that they're put in these crazy expectations, right? Like, oh, you're supposed to be the pastor's kid or the deacon's kid, therefore you need to be perfect. But all the other kids around them maybe are doing the same thing, but they're just held to a higher and different standard.
And sometimes their parents are hypocrites. They teach one thing and do another, and they see that. I mean, that's part of what y'all are saying, is just, so, that's only a
that was
theory.
one thing that was always hard for me, is because, you know, as I got older, like older teenager, I always thought, well, man, surely they're not like this all the time. And, you know, not to toot my parents' horn, but, I mean, it was they practiced what they preached and lived it to the dot, and so, you know, it was just like, okay, this is really how it's supposed to be.
And sometimes they are not exposed to the outside world until they get older, and they're like, wow, I want more of that. Right? Is that what Jeremiah's going through? I don't know, he just went ahead and made an excuse. I'm too young. So, how do you prepare yourself in planning a family reunion, picnic, or tackling a new assignment at work, moving to a new home? How do you plan? Any events that have come up? How do you plan? Do some people just wing it? Or some people actually sit down and they make a list?
She's gonna make a list, I just said, all right, let's just do it.
You just followed her list.
Exactly.
That's what it ends up being.
Yeah.
Yeah, make a list. They have to take a test of some sort. You study. You have a deadline that you create to help you get to that goal. You talk to maybe experienced people. So I'm curious, and you guys kind of head that way. Which of your spouses is the planner and the other is opposite? So William is the planner, I see.
Christine's a planner, and I'm a wing it. I just show up,
You're a wing it.
let it happen.
It depends on what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
depends on what it is.
If it's something that's broken, then I'll take care of it, and I'll plan it out. But if it's just, like, if we're going on vacation, she's already in planning mode,
Yeah.
like 3 months ago. I'm like, I don't care.
And I always
Just tell
ask
me
him,
that
well,
day.
what do you wanna do? Whatever you tell me to do.
That's right.
No.
That is a guy answer for we really don't care.
Yeah.
And then if we do care, then we won't speak up and say something.
Just tell me what we're doing.
I mean, I'm like being dead serious.
Thank you,
Oh, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
You wanna go, like, you wanna hang out with me this afternoon, we can leave.
That's
now?
it. I mean, that's just the way it is. I
We
mean,
watch Star Wars.
And
That's
then
me.
this became a marriage counseling session.
So I'm gonna move on.
Good way to bring it up.
No, it's good. My dad, he's very mechanical, methodical, and he builds it before he starts the project. He'll price it out. He knows how much it's gonna cost up to the point where he knows even the taxes, you know, he just knows. He budgets pretty well. And then he goes, he takes that amount, he divides it by 4, and he takes that 4th and adds it at the end. So he even adds a little bit more to the budget because something always happens. I'm like that, but sort of. I just go for it. It's here, I know what I want to do, I'm just going to start it. Reminds me of, I made these little pull-up bar for me and the older kids, and then I made a smaller bar for Olivia.
That's why she's so good at it.
I
We
just
just
built
put it
it,
up. We
okay.
just put it up.
But I was like, all right, I'm gonna put it here and here. And I was about to dig my third post, and Des comes out like, I don't like it there, because the concrete's right there. What if she flips it? I just creates anxiety. I was like, where were you an hour ago when I was digging the other two posts? So I had to come off in a different way, where now if she flips, she hits the ground and the grass. I mean,
Yeah, not the concrete.
our grass
Pop
is,
paramedic.
our grass is dead, it's just concrete dirt. No, it just, so here we are with Jeremiah. Why I bring that up is he just says, go. He didn't allow him to plan. You had up to your youth to know the scriptures, you've heard it, but we'll talk more about it. So, verse 7 through 10, then the Lord said to me, do not say I am a youth, for you will go to everyone I send to you and speak whatever I tell you. Do not be afraid. This is the Lord's declaration. I fill my words in your mouth. You will tear down nations. So, God says, Jeremiah, you will yield my authority, my words to my people. When I built those things that I was talking about, I do think about my dad if he was standing there. I think about what he would do. What would Dad do? And we talked about this before in another class session. Sometimes I think about what would Des do, and she'll tell you that I'll probably do the opposite. No, just kidding. So, out of all of this, what is really clear? Who does the calling? Who does the calling? God. Okay. Does God call people who are already equipped and ready to go with tons of experience?
It doesn't seem like it.
No.
I'm living proof. I'm up here. No, he doesn't. Does God really want those that are experienced to be in this position? I say in this position, just to be equipped for wherever he calls you to do. And why is that?
You'd be self-reliant.
Say that again?
You'd be self-reliant, because you know you're doing what you wanna do, and you've got it all, you don't wanna always look for him, I think, to guide you and give you the leadership.
I agree. I've had to learn that with my wife this week. I won't tell all, but there's some communication with, I've grown up in a Baptist church all my life, and she hasn't. But she has done a lot of organization for her work. And I tell you, she's awesome at it. And so it's hard to sometimes listen to her and try to have her take control when I feel like I know what I'm doing. So I have had to humble myself. And so I think if we already are experienced in that area, it's less likely we're going to be humble to follow what God wants us to do. Just my opinion. So then we know that God does the equipping. So what do we have to be afraid of? If you think about, there are so many things in our church, so many needs. What are we afraid of? I'm not asking you to answer that. It's personal. What about Jeremiah? What's he afraid of? He's afraid that he's not equipped, more than likely. Right? All right, so 11 through 16, God gives Jeremiah two visions that will help him understand. It says, then the word of the Lord came to me asking, what do you see, Jeremiah? He replied, I see a branch of an almond tree. This is actually an almond tree in Jerusalem. This is very common. I didn't know this. It's a reminder. that it branches over. He's got them, okay? The first vision is an almond tree. The almond trees are super common in Israel, and this is a picture of one in Israel. That matters because Jeremiah is going to see them all the time throughout his ministry in Israel. 2 words to listen for as we go through these scriptures in the book of Jeremiah is shaked. Close enough? The Hebrew word for almond, and shaked. Be careful. It's the Hebrew word for watch. So think about these words too. We'll go through that as we go through the book of Jeremiah. That comes up quite often. But you see how close they are. So every time Jeremiah sees an almond tree, it is a reminder of God watching over him and his people. So this is Google Earth. I Googled this the other day. So what we have here, so we're talking about the second vision. The Lord said to me, disaster will be poured out from the north on all who live on the land. The vision he had was a boiling pot being tipped, the lip tilted from the north to the south. So this is just a bigger picture. I'll zoom in here in just a minute. So you have Babylon here, Syria here, Israel way over here. Anybody know what's going on right here?
Wilderness?
It's all desert, okay? And this will all make sense here in a minute. This is all desert. Is it really a good idea to attack from the desert? Do you think you could really march Babylonians march through the desert to attack? No, they can't survive that. Egypt's down here, and that's another story that we'll go through later on. Wait. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so here's a clearer picture. This is back in the day. Okay, now you see Babylonia. Assyria's up here. Okay, here is the desert, the mountainous areas here, and we're about to zoom in onto that. Y'all getting a clearer picture. So I have, as we go through these books, I put these pictures up here, nice little posters, and I'll be able to go and point to them. I got this one over here too, talking about Judah, because that's where our main story is. The Babylonian here. So they're just reference for y'all to look at if we go through it. And you're like, wait, where's that at again? And then we can point to them and tell you. So you see that square there, I'm about to zoom in. Okay, now there's Judah again, Jerusalem, Bethlehem. Y'all getting the picture? Y'all really getting, and I don't know if y'all have ever seen this before. I thought it was cool for me to actually go through these. Just a bigger picture there. Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Jericho. And these are, how many of you guys have these maps in the back of your Bible and never actually looked at them? Me. Okay, and then I went ahead and put this in for free. So you see the Anatot that I put out there, that's actually modern day today. It still exists. But you see where Bethlehem is? Jerusalem is just right above it. Right here. And this is the small town that Jeremiah's from. He was just a small town preacher's kid, priest's kid, whatever they're called. There is a name for him, I don't know. So y'all get the bigger picture now, y'all understand what's going on. God's calling such a country boy, in our terms, a country boy to go out and deal with Babylonians way over there in Assyria. So I'm bringing this back up because what he talked about was God's talking about the wrath coming from the north being tipped. What happens is Babylonians go up and they attack Assyria first. Okay? Assyrians. So now they're up here where? In the north? So what God's talking about is they're about to come down and rain on Judah. So the tipping pot is tipped from the north, and all that is going to be poured down to the south. All that makes sense? Okay, good. There's your history lesson for today. That was free. Sorry about that. Any questions on those maps? Okay, good. Moving on. So why is God going to judge Judah this harshly? So for all the evil they have done, abandon God, burn incense to other gods, worship the works of their own hands, following worthless idols, turning their back on God, adultery, abuse, lied about sinning against God. They even said when it comes to God, they would lie to God and say, "No, I didn't sin against you." Thanks. So, if y'all have to go, I'm sorry, I ran over time. So much for that. So at 17, it says, "Now get ready, stand up and tell them everything that I have commanded you. Do not be intimidated by them, or I will cause you to cower before them." This is about, if you do it yourself, God's going to go, "Okay, go ahead and see how that works out for you." Okay? But he's telling him with confidence, do it as I tell you, and you'll be just fine. Okay? Don't fret about the haters. God has your back. God does it all, despite Jeremiah's inadequacies. Isn't that still true today? Anyone go through life, and once you realize you give it to God, it actually works out in your favor? It does. Or at least you know it's taken care of like it should be. Okay? I want to skip ahead. Okay? This was about the fortified city, iron pillars. Just the size of it was actually quite huge. Compared to that person there, they still exist today. So I had to come up with a theme for this study, and I heard it yesterday, and it's kind of tough. It's kind of a tough one. You're either all in or you're in the way. How does that make you feel when you hear that? Like I just judged you? Kind of.
Reality check.
So, my prayer for this class is that we become a family. We stand by each other, we love each other, we reach out to others, and not only to grow with our personal, spiritual self, our family, but to reach out to others and not to miss an opportunity that walks right in front of us. I mean, you guys have really stepped up. Y'all have done really good. We've had a loss, the longest. They had a loss this week, and our heart goes out to them. We're communicating with each other. We're trying to figure things out. So get ready. This class is about to take off, and I want everyone in it. I want everyone to be in it with me, with us. I know Tessa. Is it Contessa or Tessa?
It's either or is fine.
What do you prefer?
Really don't prefer. Honestly, it's just, I found it's easier to remember Tess.
Oh,
Oh, now you said Tess. See?
there it is. That's the official. It's
Yeah,
Teston.
So they're about to have a family or a newborn. That's huge. And so it's our responsibility as a team, as a family, to take care of each other. So I hope you're all in, including serving, whether it's at home, talking to people, or sending emails, or calling, being a part of this class, church. Because if you're not all in, God will use someone else. This was a tough one for me. Any last comments on that? I'm sorry we didn't break down all the passages here, but this was the main one. Okay? No last comments? Complaints, concerns? All right, let's pray.